10 Downing Street, also known as number 10, along with the adjoining Cabinet Office at 70 Whitehall, is the headquarters of the Government of the United Kingdom and the official residence and office of the First Lord of the Treasury, a post which for much of the 18th and 19th centuries, and since 1905, has been held by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It's been the locale of British Prime Ministers since 1735, and Prime Ministers have officially lived here full-time since 1997. The famous black bricks of the house are actually yellow underneath. They were blackened by the London smog during the 19th century, and as a result were painted black during the 1960s, since people were accustomed to seeing them that way.
Exactly, that's what I've done. They're on their way up.
10 Downing Street is named after Sir George Downing, who was a preacher, soldier, statesman, diplomat, spymaster, and politician whose allegiances notably changed during his career. He was greatly responsible for arranging the acquisition of New York from the Dutch. Interested in power and money, he saw an opportunity to make his fortune in property. Many of his contemporaries accused him of meanness and of being a miser. In 1654, he acquired land adjacent to St. James's Park, where he built a street of red brick terraced houses designed by Sir Christopher Wren, who also designed St. Paul's Cathedral. This later became Downing Street. The address was actually 5 Downing Street until 1779.
Hello. Is this the Prime Minister's house?
Yeah.
Oh, Downing 10 is over there?
Over there, yeah. And you can go and see this is the closest you'll get. How long are you in the UK for?
2 weeks.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Enjoy it, excuse me guys?
Yes.
Sorry. Sorry, you're off.
In the 20th century alone, the First and Second World Wars were directed from here, as were the key decisions about the end of the Empire, the building of the British nuclear bomb, and the handling of economic crises from the Great Depression in 1929 to the Great Recession. Near 10 Downing Street on Whitehall is the Monument to the Women of World War II, which was sculpted by John W. Mills, unveiled by Queen Elizabeth II, and dedicated by Baroness Boothroyd in July 2005. The bronze monument stands 22 feet high, 16 feet long, and 6 feet wide. The lettering on the sides replicates the typeface used on wartime ration books. There are 17 individual sets of clothing and uniforms around the sides, symbolizing the hundreds of different jobs women undertook in World War II, and then gave back to the homecoming men at the end of the war. Also near 10 Downing Street on Whitehall in the other direction is a cenotaph, a war memorial. It was originally a temporary structure erected for a peace parade following the end of World War I, but after an outpouring of national sentiment, it was replaced in 1920 by a permanent structure and designated the United Kingdom's official national war memorial. An annual service of remembrance is held at the site on Remembrance Sunday, the closest Sunday to November 11th, Armistice Day, each year. The memorial is now also used to remember the dead of later wars in which British servicemen and servicewomen have fought. So we are here on Carnaby Street in London, and the reason I want to be here is because I'm a big fan of the 1960s, and this was the epicenter of 60s cool and 60s fashion in London. So think Austin Powers, this is where he'd be hanging out. While Carnaby Street is still known for fashion and shopping, it's had quite an interesting history. It derives its name from Carnaby House, spelled with a K, which was built in 1683 to the east. The origin of the name is unknown. The street was probably laid out in 1685 or 1686. It was almost completely built up by 1690 with small houses. The area around Carnaby was used as a mass burial ground due to the Great Plague of the 17th century. This area is also known for a cholera outbreak in 1854. By the 1960s, Carnaby Street was popular with followers of the mod and hippie styles. Many independent fashion boutiques and designers were located here, and various underground music bars opened in the surrounding streets. Bands such as the Rolling Stones, The Who, and the Small Faces appeared in the area to work, mostly at the legendary Marquee Club around the corner, and to shop and socialize. And did I mention that the Beatles shopped here too? Carnaby Street became one of the coolest destinations associated with 1960s swinging London. An April 15, 1966 publication of Time magazine's cover an article about Carnaby Street helped publicize it in the US and add to its international reputation. Quote, "Perhaps nothing illustrates the new swinging London better than narrow 3-block long Carnaby Street, which is crammed with a cluster of the gear boutiques where the girls and boys buy each other clothing," end quote. The first boutique on Carnaby Street was His Clothes, opened in 1958 by John Stephen, later known as the King of Carnaby Street. The opening of Lady Jane Boutique on Carnaby Street in May 1966 involved live models dressing and undressing in the window of the shop. Henry Moss, the owner of the boutique, was arrested and fined £2 for obstructing the highway due to the large crowd of men who had gathered to watch the models. So if you're visiting London, drop by Carnaby Street, enjoy some shopping, and try to picture for a moment what things were like here a half a century ago. Good afternoon. The name is Bond Street. So down this way is Old Bond Street. We have Rolex and Tiffany. I'm gonna guess this is a pretty upscale area. Beautiful architecture though. And you see the signs. And in this direction is New Bond Street. Reminds me a little bit of the area around Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. So you better go to the ATM a few times if you want to afford stuff here. We are on Oxford Street. This is like one of the main shopping streets in London, which you can see better on the other side. Here at Piccadilly Circus in London, and no, there is no circus here. It's actually a roundabout, and it's famous for the fountain that we just saw. Let's show it again. And also for the neon, which is kind of like Times Square in New York, only smaller. Even a phrase, it's like Piccadilly Circus that's used. And what that means is, it refers to any place that's really busy with people, like you're seeing right now. And it says that a person who stays long enough in Piccadilly Circus will eventually run into everyone that they know. That's how busy this place is. There's also a World War II connection with the name Piccadilly Circus. That was the code name given to the Allies' D-Day invasion fleet when they were in the English Channel. So this place became really busy in 1885 with the creation of Shaftesbury Avenue. And even back then, there were a lot of billboards and stuff like you see today, except today they're electronic, of course. This is called the Shaftesbury Memorial Fountain. It was built in 1893. and it was built to commemorate Lord Shaftesbury, who was a philanthropist who supported the poor. So that's kind of a tribute to him. Piccadilly comes from a 17th century frilled collar called a piccadille. And a tailor named Roger Baker became rich making piccadilles, living in this area. And the word circus that we talked about before, that just refers to the roundabout. So if you ever get to London, Piccadilly Circus, it's a very famous area, very busy, a lot happening here. And there's some beautiful architecture in this area as well. In Piccadilly Circus, you can see two of London's most famous moving landmarks, the red double-decker buses and the black taxi cabs. So why do 100 million people pass through here each year? Well, there are 5 main roads that intersect here, and there's plenty of places to visit. The building on the left, which has a green dome on top, has a Magnum pleasure store and a holistic center. Under the electric billboards, there's a Gap, a Barclays Bank, and a Boots store. The London Pavilion was previously a theater, but is now a shopping arcade. In October 1962, it premiered Dr. No, the first James Bond film, and in July 1964 was the venue for the premiere of A Hard Day's Night. Today it hosts Body World's London. Left to right is a Hard Rock Cafe, a restaurant, and to the left of the fountain is a Criterion Theater. Right behind the fountain is a Lily White sports retailer store. That is it from Piccadilly Circus. Welcome to Trafalgar Square. And there is the statue of Admiral Nelson right in the middle. Trafalgar Square is visited by 15 million tourists a year. It's a wide open space, a public square in the city of Westminster, built around the area formerly known as Charing Cross. It's a great place to people watch and to hang out, and it's surrounded by a lot of hustle and bustle and interesting things to see. A little known fact is that Trafalgar Square hasn't always just been a gathering place for people. In the 1950s, construction revealed the skeletons of a number of animals under the square, including ancient cave lions, rhinos, and hippos. The name of the square commemorates the Battle of Trafalgar, a British naval victory in the Napoleonic Wars with France and Spain that took place in 1805 off the coast of Cape Trafalgar. It was officially named Trafalgar Square in 1830, but didn't open to the public until 1844. Nelson's Column has special significance for the British. It was designed by William Railton and features a statue of naval war hero Admiral Horatio Nelson. He had previously lost an arm and an eye in battle, but he lost his life in the Battle of Trafalgar. The granite statue was sculpted by E.H. Bailey. It's 5 meters high and stands on a bronze platform made from old guns. It's inspected every 2 years to assess its condition. So important is Nelson's Column for London that during World War II, the Nazis had planned to capture it and bring it back to Berlin. Sir Edwin Landseer designed the bronze lions which are said to protect Nelson's Column. Originally the lions were on their hind legs, but Queen Victoria found it shocking and didn't like what she saw underneath, so she demanded the lions be lying down. One major attraction here is the National Gallery, which since opening in 1824 has grown to be one of the most visited art galleries in the world. In fact, only the Louvre, the British Museum, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York welcome more guests every year. It features over 2,300 paintings. St. Martin in the Fields Church is an English Anglican church. There has been a church on this site since at least the medieval period. When its old structure was found to be near failure, the present building was constructed in a neoclassical design by James Gibbs from 1722 to 1726. The square has always been used for community gatherings and political demonstrations. A Christmas tree has been donated to the square by Norway since 1947 and is erected for 12 days before and after Christmas Day. Well, that's it from Trafalgar Square. Cheerio! This is Savile Row in London. This is where James Bond gets his suits tailored. And if James Bond gets his suits tailored at Savile Row, then Andy Teach should get his suits tailored at Savile Row. Savile Row in London, England produces some of the finest tailor-made suits in the world. As a former Hollywood studio executive, I used to wear suits all the time, so I had a genuine interest in coming here. However, the two main reasons I came here was because of Savile Row's connection to James Bond and the Beatles. In the first James Bond film, Dr. No, when James Bond, played by Sean Connery, was asked where he gets his suits, he replies, "My tailor, Savile Row." In reality, none of the James Bond actors got their suits from Savile Row itself, but from the area around Savile Row. However, many of the suits were patterned after the style of Savile Row suits. Now, before we talk about the Beatles connection, here's some interesting history about Savile Row. Originally named Savile Street, it was built between 1731 and 1735 as part of the development of the Burlington estate. Initially, the street was occupied mainly by military officers and their wives. Tailors started doing business in the area in the late 18th century, then by 1803 in Savile Row itself. In 1846, Henry Poole, later credited as the creator of the dinner jacket or tuxedo, opened an entrance to Savile Row from his tailoring premises in Old Burlington Street. Founded in 1849 by Henry Huntsman, H. Huntsman and Sons moved to Savile Row with the ending of World War I in 1919. During the First World War, Huntsman's was a tailor to the military, producing dress uniforms for British officers throughout the conflict. Huntsman's heritage is as an equestrian tailor, making hunting and riding clothes for European aristocracy. Huntsman also does a particularly strong line in tweed, with particular emphasis on a padded shoulder and a one-button jacket. Dating back to 1865, Deege and Skinner is notable for being one of the few houses left on Savile Row to be family-owned. Deege is equally known for civilian clothing as it is for its military uniforms, with a style that is a solid British military cut. It is also the only house on the road to have its own shirt-cutting facility on site. Chiddleborough and Morgan at Nutters was born out of Nutters of Savile Row. In 1969, Nutters of Savile Row, led by Tommy Nutter, modernized the style and approach of traditional Savile Row tailoring. Nutter dressed Mick Jagger and Elton John, and Beatles John, Paul, and Ringo wore Tommy Nutter suits in the famous Abbey Road album cover. This modernization continued in the 1990s with a new bespoke movement. The term bespoke is understood to have originated in Savile Row and came to mean a suit cut and made by hand. Usually a bespoke suit will take 3 or 4 appointments, with each separated by a few weeks. Oh, and a bespoke suit can cost between £4,000 to £10,000, so I think I'll just stick to window shopping. In terms of style, Savile Row suits tend to be harder and sharper than tailoring made elsewhere. They use more shoulder padding and canvas and prioritize straight angular lines. There are 3 different cuts: traditional, drape, and exaggerated. Now for the other Beatles connection. On January 30th, 1969, the Beatles played a surprise concert on the roof of their Apple Record Company headquarters. This famous rooftop concert was performed at 3 Savile Row. They played songs from the Let It Be album before the police shut down the performance, and John Lennon famously said at the end of the concert, "I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we've passed the audition." I'd show you some close-ups of the building, but I made a big rookie mistake. I was so interested to see all the men's suit shops that I totally forgot to check out 3 Savile Row, and I'm a Beatles fanatic. Fortunately, I was able to take a great Beatles tour in London, so that was some consolation. Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Hyde Park. The sun is out in London. That's awesome. Hyde Park is pretty big. And it's a great place to hang out on a nice Sunday. But I also know it because there are so many great concerts held here, including the Rolling Stones, of course. Princess dies, Memorial Fountain.
I don't know why else people have
We're here at St. James Park, another park in London. We just came from Buckingham Palace on the way to Westminster Abbey. And we have a few interesting animals here. So we're very fortunate to have nice sunny weather the last 2 days since we started our trip here in London. Beautiful day. This is the view of Buckingham Palace from St. James Park. That reminds me of old London. We're here in Shepherd Market in London, England. There's the King's Arms. Looks like a nice pub. Some bowler hats. Very British. And we're now going to find some lunch. We flew here 10 hours, 8-hour time difference. A little tired. First day in London. But it was recommended we go here, and then we're going to go to Hyde Park next.